I remember my childhood like it was yesterday. The smell of my dad's aftershave, the sound of his keys jingling as he came home from work. I'm Alice, and this is my story. I was born into what you'd call an ordinary family. Mom, Dad, and me. But from the get-go, it was clear who my favorite was. Dad. He was my hero, my everything. Every day, I'd wait by the window, my nose pressed against the glass, waiting for his car to pull up. The moment I saw him, I'd bolt to the door, ready to jump into his arms. "There's my little princess," he'd say, scooping me up and spinning me around. I'd giggle, burying my face in his neck, breathing in that familiar scent that meant safety and love. Mom? Well, she was there. Physically, at least. Emotionally? Not so much. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with this weird expression, like I was some kind of burden she hadn't signed up for. But Dad made up for it. Every evening, rain or shine, we'd go for walks. He'd point out different trees, teach me about birds, or just let me ramble on about my day at kindergarten. Bedtime was the best. Dad would tuck me in, pull out a book, and transport us both to magical worlds. His voice would change for each character, making me laugh or gasp in all the right places. But when I turned 5, everything changed. I remember the day they sat me down. Mom looked relieved, Dad looked heartbroken. "Alice, honey," Dad started, his voice cracking. "Mommy and Daddy, we're not going to be living together anymore." I didn't understand at first. "Like when you go on business trips?" I asked. Mom cut in, her voice flat. "No, Alice, we're getting divorced. But don't worry, you'll be staying with your father. It's better this way." I looked at Dad, tears welling up in his eyes. He pulled me close, and I could feel him shaking. He said everything would be okay, but even at 5, I knew, nothing would ever be the same again. The divorce hit me hard, but Dad did his best to make things normal. We moved to a new neighborhood with a good school nearby. I remember the day we arrived at our new house. "What do you think, Alice?" Dad asked, his eyes hopeful. I looked at the unfamiliar building and felt a lump in my throat. "It's big," I managed to say. Dad knelt down beside me. "I know it's different, sweetheart. But we'll make it our home together, okay?" I nodded, trying to be brave for him. The new school was okay, I guess. I made some friends, but I missed my old life. Dad tried to keep our routines, walks in the evening, bedtime stories, but something had changed. There was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Mom? She became like a ghost in my life. She'd call sometimes, her voice distant and distracted. "How's school, Alice?" she'd ask, but I could tell she didn't really care about the answer. Once in a while, she'd take me for a weekend. It was always awkward, like we were strangers forced to spend time together. I'd come home to Dad, relief washing over me as I stepped through the door. One day, when I was 6, Dad sat me down with a serious look on his face. "Alice, honey, I've got some news," he said, fidgeting with his hands. "I've met someone. Her name is Sarah, and, well, we're getting married. Sarah is nice, I promise. You'll like her." I didn't want to like her. I wanted things to stay as they were, just me and Dad. But life had other plans. Sarah moved in, and suddenly our quiet house was full of noise and change. She tried to be nice, always smiling too brightly, asking too many questions. "Alice, sweetie, what would you like for dinner?" she'd ask, her voice syrupy sweet. "Whatever," I'd mutter, retreating to my room. Then came the biggest change of all. I was in the living room, watching TV, when Dad and Sarah came in, both grinning from ear to ear. "Alice, we have wonderful news," Sarah gushed. "You're going to be a big sister." I looked at Dad, hoping to see some sign that this was a joke. But he was beaming, his hand on Sarah's stomach. "Isn't it great, princess?" he said. "You'll have a little brother or sister to play with." I forced a smile, but inside, I felt like screaming. A baby? How could he do this? Didn't he love me enough? Months passed, and Sarah's belly grew bigger. Dad spent more and more time fussing over her, buying baby things, talking about names. I felt like I was fading into the background. The day the baby was born, I was left with a neighbor. When Dad finally came to get me, he looked exhausted but happy. "Come meet your baby brother, Alice," he said. At the hospital, I peered into the crib at the tiny, red-faced bundle. I looked at the baby, then at Dad, who was gazing at his new son with such love it made my heart hurt. Life changed fast after Tommy was born. Dad was completely wrapped up in his new family, and I felt like I was fading into the background. The walks, the bedtime stories, the special moments, they all disappeared, replaced by diaper changes and late-night feedings. Sarah, my stepmother, barely hid her annoyance with me. I'd catch her giving me these looks, like I was some unwanted houseguest who'd overstayed my welcome. One day, I overheard her talking to Dad in the kitchen. "John, why don't we see if Alice's mother wants her back? It might be better for everyone." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Dad's voice was sharp when he replied, "Absolutely not. Alice is my daughter, and this is her home. I expect you to treat her like your own." After that, Sarah was careful not to say anything outright mean to me, but the damage was done. I knew where I stood in her eyes, a burden, an obstacle to her perfect little family. As the years went by, I learned to fend for myself. Dad was always busy with Tommy, teaching him to walk, to talk, attending his little league games. I grew up in the shadows, becoming fiercely independent out of necessity. High school graduation came and went. Dad, true to his word, paid for my college tuition. "It's from the money your mom's been sending all these years," he explained. "I've been saving it for your education." I was surprised. I'd assumed Mom had just disappeared from my life completely. But I was grateful for the chance to get away, to start fresh in a new city. College flew by. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. I graduated with a degree in financial management, feeling proud and accomplished. But when I returned home, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. The house felt different, smaller somehow. Sarah greeted me with a tight smile. "Oh, Alice, you're back. We weren't expecting you so soon." I lugged my bags upstairs, only to find my childhood bedroom completely transformed. Where my bed used to be, there was now a treadmill. My desk had been replaced by a huge TV and gaming console. The walls, once covered in my posters, were now bare. "Tommy needed a rec room," Sarah explained, not even trying to sound apologetic. "You can sleep on the couch in the living room. It's just temporary, right?" I stood there, staring at the stranger my room had become, feeling more out of place than ever. "Right," I mumbled. "Temporary." The job search was tough, but I finally landed an entry-level position at a local firm. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. Every night, I'd scour apartment listings, looking for something, anything, I could afford. "Maybe you could find a roommate," Dad suggested one evening, in a rare moment of attention. "Split the rent?" I nodded, adding another search parameter to my list. But decent, affordable apartments with potential roommates were hard to come by. So, I stayed. Every morning, I'd wake up on that uncomfortable couch, tiptoe around Tommy's toys scattered across the living room floor, and head to work. Every evening, I'd come back to Sarah's cold stares and Dad's distracted nods. Months dragged on, and I was still stuck in limbo, sleeping on the couch and searching for a way out. Tommy had started high school, and suddenly the house was abuzz with excitement, but not for me. "John, darling," Sarah cooed one evening, her voice sickly sweet. "Don't you think Tommy needs a car? All his friends are driving now." I nearly choked on my dinner. Tommy was barely 15, for crying out loud. Dad, ever the pushover when it came to his precious son, nodded. "You're right, honey. We'll go car shopping this weekend." And just like that, Tommy got a shiny new car. Never mind that he couldn't legally drive it yet. I bit my tongue, trying to swallow the bitterness rising in my throat. My birthday rolled around a few weeks later. For once, I decided to ask for something. I approached Dad cautiously. "Hey, Dad? I was wondering, could I maybe get a laptop for my birthday? I could pick up some freelance work online, make some extra money." Before Dad could respond, Sarah swooped in, her face twisted with anger. "A laptop? Are you serious, Alice? You're already living here rent-free, eating our food, and now you want more?" Her voice dripped with venom. "You're nothing but a money-grubbing freeloader." I stood there, shocked into silence, as she continued her tirade. "Have you no shame? Your father just paid for your entire college education, and here you are, asking for more expensive gifts." She was on a roll now, tears springing to her eyes in a dramatic display. What about Tommy's future? At this rate, he'll never be able to go to college, because his greedy sister is bleeding us dry. "Sarah, that's enough." Dad's voice cut through her performance. "We have a separate account for Tommy's college fund. It's all taken care of, so please, calm down." Sarah huffed and stormed out of the room, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Dad sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I'm sorry about that, Alice. We'll talk about the laptop later, okay?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As soon as I could, I escaped to the backyard, needing some air. Sitting on the old swing set, I let the tears I'd been holding back fall freely. Sarah's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. I wiped my eyes, a new resolve settling over me. I wouldn't ask for anything ever again. I'd find a way to make it on my own, without their help or their judgment. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, life decided to prove me wrong. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when all hell broke loose. Dad burst into the living room, his face red with fury. "Where is it?" he bellowed, making me jump. "Where's my damn money?" Sarah and Tommy came running, eyes wide with shock. I sat there, frozen, as Dad continued his tirade. "Someone's been using my card. The one for Tommy's college fund." He was pacing now, hands shaking. "Jewelry stores, electronics. Who the hell's been spending my money?" His eyes landed on me, narrowing with suspicion. "Alice, did you take my cards? Have you been in my wallet?" I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. "What? No, Dad, I would never." But he wasn't listening. He was on a rampage, tearing through the room like a tornado. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "John, check her backpack. It's right there." Before I could protest, Dad grabbed my bag. I watched in horror as he dumped its contents onto the couch. Books, papers, pens, and there, gleaming in the midst of it all, was a brand new laptop. The room fell silent. I stared at the laptop, my mind reeling. I hadn't bought this. Dad's voice was dangerously low. "You thieving little..." "Dad, no. I didn't do this," I pleaded, panic rising in my throat. "I don't know where that came from." "And jewelry? Why would I buy jewelry? Call the police. Check the store cameras. You'll see it wasn't me." But my words fell on deaf ears. Sarah stepped forward, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "John, can't you see? She has no respect for you. She's lying to your face, even with the evidence right in front of her." She turned to me, eyes glinting with triumph. "We should have known you'd do something like this. Always wanting more, never satisfied with what you have." Dad's next words hit me like a physical blow. "Get out." "What?" I whispered, not believing what I was hearing. "Get out of my house," he roared. "You ungrateful. I never want to see you again. Get your things and leave now." Numbly, I gathered what I could. Clothes, toiletries, my phone charger. It all went into a duffel bag I found in the closet. The whole time, Dad stood there, watching me with a mixture of anger and disgust that broke my heart. As I headed for the door, Sarah's parting shot hit me. "We should have done this years ago. Good riddance to bad rubbish." The door slammed behind me, and just like that, I was alone. Homeless. Accused of a crime I didn't commit. As the reality of my situation sank in, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The house behind me had stopped being a home long ago. Maybe this was the push I needed to truly start my own life. That first night after being kicked out was a blur. I found myself in a dingy hostel, clutching my duffel bag like a lifeline. Sleep eluded me as I lay on the lumpy mattress, my mind racing with unanswered questions and fear for the future. The next day at work, I must have looked as lost as I felt. My colleague, Jessica, cornered me in the break room. "All right, spill it. What's going on with you?" she demanded, her concern evident. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole sordid story. Jessica listened, her eyes widening with each new detail. "That's insane," she said when I finished. Then, without missing a beat, "Move in with me. I'd been looking for a roommate anyway. We can split the rent. It'll be perfect." And just like that, I had a lifeline. I moved in with Jessica that weekend, grateful beyond words for her kindness. 2 years passed in a whirlwind. I threw myself into work, determined to prove to myself, and everyone else, that I could make it on my own. I didn't speak to Dad at all during this time. The pain of his betrayal was still too raw. Mom tried to reach out a few times, but our conversations were strained. It was clear Dad had told her about the alleged theft. Her disappointment was palpable, even over the phone. Eventually, those calls stopped too. But life has a way of moving forward, whether you're ready or not. I got promoted at work, started earning enough to consider my own place. I picked up new hobbies, yoga, painting, anything to keep my mind occupied. I even started dating again, though nothing serious. Finally, I took the plunge and rented my own apartment. It was small, but it was mine. No judgmental stares, no walking on eggshells. Just peace and independence. I was just settling into my new routine when the unexpected happened. There was a knock at my door one Saturday afternoon. I opened it, and there stood Dad. He looked older, more haggard than I remembered. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying. "Can I come in?" he choked out. "Your mother gave me the address. Alice, I need to talk to you." I stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to throw him out like he'd done to me. But another part, a part one thought I'd buried, wanted desperately to hear what he had to say. Dad took a deep breath. "I found out what really happened 2 years ago," he began, his voice shaking. It wasn't you. It was Sarah." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What?" He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "She framed you. She's the one who took my credit cards, who bought all that stuff. I found jewelry, clothes, all hidden away in her things. Price tags still on them and everything." I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Dad's words washed over me, each one a mix of vindication and reopened wounds. I sat there, stunned, as Dad continued his story. His voice trembled with a mix of anger and regret as he recounted the events that led to this moment. "After I found the jewelry, I started paying closer attention," he said, running a hand through his graying hair. "One night, I caught Sarah red-handed, going through my wallet. She was taking my credit cards, Alice. I felt a lump form in my throat. All this time, I'd been right. But the vindication tasted bitter." Dad went on, his words tumbling out faster now. "I confronted her, and it all came spilling out. She's been shopping compulsively for years. At first, she said it was all for Tommy. But now? She's maxed out credit cards, taken out loans, all for stuff we don't need." I shook my head, disbelief warring with a perverse sense of satisfaction. "And the laptop? The one you found in my bag?" Dad's face crumpled. "She planted it there. Bought it with my card and slipped it into your things. God, Alice, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you." The apology hung in the air between us, heavy and insufficient. I told her she needed help, Dad continued. Begged her to see a therapist to get treatment for her shopping addiction. But she refused. Said there was nothing wrong with her. I could picture it, Sarah, defiant and unapologetic. Just like she'd been the day they kicked me out. And then, Dad's voice dropped to a near whisper, she said she was right to frame you. That she'd do it again if she had the chance. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the couch, steadying myself. That was it for me, Dad said. I filed for divorce the next day. Kicked her out of the house. I couldn't live with someone who'd hurt my daughter like that. He looked at me then, his eyes pleading. Alice, I know I don't deserve it, but please, can you forgive me? I was blind and stupid, and I hurt you so badly. I'm so sorry. I stared at him, this man who had once been my hero. The father who'd read me bedtime stories and taught me to ride a bike. The same father who'd thrown me out without a second thought, who'd believed the worst of me so easily. For a moment, I was that scared, heartbroken girl again, standing on the sidewalk with nowhere to go. The pain of that betrayal washed over me anew. Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't forgive you. Not now, maybe not ever. You didn't just kick me out. You believed I could do something so terrible. You didn't even try to hear my side. And for 2 years, Dad, you didn't call, didn't check if I was okay. Dad nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand, he choked out. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I needed you to know the truth. I stood up, suddenly needing space. Thank you for telling me, but I think you should go now. As the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor, emotions overwhelming me. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like reopening a wound that had never really healed. After Dad left, I thought I'd finally have peace. But life had other plans. My phone started ringing incessantly, Mom, trying to play peacemaker. Alice, honey, she'd plead, your father is truly sorry. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive him? Each call left me more frustrated than the last. Mom, please. I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But she wouldn't let up. One evening, I opened my door to find both my parents standing there. What are you doing here? I demanded, anger bubbling up inside me. Mom pushed past me into the apartment, Dad trailing behind looking sheepish. Alice, this has gone on long enough, she started, her voice stern. Your father made a mistake, but he's apologized. You have no right to hold this grudge. Think of all the good things he's done for you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No right? He kicked me out. He believed I was a thief. Where was all this support when I was sleeping on a friend's couch, trying to rebuild my life? Mom opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. No, I'm done. Both of you, please leave. And don't come back. If you keep pushing this, I'll get a restraining order. I mean it. The shock on their faces would have been comical if the situation wasn't so painful. Mom looked like she wanted to yell, but Dad put a hand on her arm. We understand, Alice, he said quietly. We'll go, but I'll be here when you're ready. If you're ever ready. As the door closed behind them, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. I sank onto my couch, desperate for some peace to heal. Weeks passed. Life went on. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the mundane routine of everyday life. One day, while grabbing coffee, I spotted a familiar face, Sarah, my ex-stepmother. She was leaving a casino, phone pressed to her ear. I know I owe you, I overheard her say, but I'm sure I'll win it back this time. Just need a little more time. I ducked out of sight, a mix of pity and satisfaction washing over me. Her actions had cost her everything, yet she was still in denial. Tommy, my stepbrother, occasionally sent me text messages. Short, awkward exchanges that never went deep. He was in college now, trying to forge his own path. Like me, he seemed to be keeping his distance from the family drama. Months turned into a year. I met someone, Mark. Kind, funny, understanding Mark. As our relationship grew serious, he asked about my family. I told him everything. Wow, he said, holding me close. You've been through so much. Whatever you decide about your parents, I'm here for you. Now, as I sit here twirling the engagement ring on my finger, I'm faced with a decision I never thought I'd have to make. Our wedding is months away, and I still don't know if I want my parents there. Part of me wants to extend an olive branch, to see if we can build something new from the ashes of our old relationship. Another part is terrified of letting them back in, of making myself vulnerable again. I look at the save the date cards on my coffee table, 2 envelopes set aside, one for mom, one for dad. My pen hovers over them, indecision paralyzing me. In the end, I set the pen down. I'm not ready to make this decision yet, and that's okay. I've learned that healing takes time, and forgiveness can't be forced.
Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer. My parents came to America with nothing but $200 and big dreams. My dad worked 2 jobs and my mom cleaned houses, saving every penny they could. Always keep your own money, baby girl. Dad told me when I got my first paper route at 12. Independence is freedom. In the old country, women without their own money had no choices. Those words shaped my life. Through high school, I worked every summer instead of vacationing. During college, I juggled scholarships and part-time jobs. By 25, I had my corner office at Goldman Sachs. That's where I met David. Your market analysis is impressive, he said, actually looking at my presentation, not just my face. Most people wouldn't have caught that pattern. He was different from the usual trust fund crowd. I respected his genuine interest in my work and my independence. Our wedding was perfect until his sister Elizabeth cornered me at the reception. Separate bank accounts? How modern, she said with thinly veiled sarcasm. In our family, we share everything. Right, Daddy? Peter, my father-in-law, nodded sagely. Family money should stay in the family. These independent arrangements can lead to trust issues. Easy for her to say. Elizabeth's career was a series of failed fashion blogs bankrolled by her parents. At 32, she was still living in their Manhattan apartment, finding herself. Every Sunday dinner, my mother-in-law Lisa would ask, "Don't you trust David with money?" In her day, wives simply trusted their husbands. But for me, it wasn't about trust. It was about maintaining the independence we both valued. My cousin Margaret saw through their pretense. They hate that you don't need their money, she told me. An independent woman is their worst nightmare. David always defended me. Jennifer earned everything she has, and I love that about her. I thought we'd reached an understanding. But one day, I came home early with a migraine, only to hear Elizabeth's voice drifting from my home office. It has to be here somewhere. I found her rifling through my desk drawers, clutching my investment statements. "Oh, you startled me," she stammered. "Just looking for a pen." In my locked desk drawer, her excuses couldn't hide her intentions. This was more than nosiness. This was about control, about a family desperate to rein me in. Looking back, I realized that was just the beginning. At the next family dinner, Elizabeth smirked and made her move. I spoke to our family financial advisor, she announced. Joining the family investment pool would be perfect for Jennifer. Lisa chimed in, "Wonderful idea. All the family money in one place." I replied, "I'm comfortable with my current investments, thank you." Elizabeth's tone turned saccharine. "Unless you don't trust us." David squeezed my hand under the table. "Our arrangement works for us." But Peter put down his wine glass hard. "Son, separate finances often mean someone's planning an exit strategy." The room fell silent as David stood, face flushed. "Enough, Dad." The tension simmered until Elizabeth orchestrated her next move at the country club. "We're all investing in a vacation property in Aspen. You and David must join us." When I politely declined, she leaned in with a sweet smile. "Like your secret accounts, I mean independent accounts." Rumors spread fast. Margaret warned me, "Elizabeth's been asking around about your salary, bonuses, everything." I could feel the pressure mounting, but I was done playing their game. At Peter's birthday dinner, Elizabeth clinked her glass for a toast. To family unity. Well, almost unity. Some of us still keep secrets. I stood up, steady and calm. Exactly what are you implying? Elizabeth shrugged, her voice honeyed. Just that true family doesn't need separate accounts, right? Lisa nodded. It does make people wonder about your commitment, dear. David's fist hit the table. Stop it, all of you. Peter's voice tried to sound soothing as he broke the tense silence at the dinner table. We're just concerned, Jennifer, he said. When my friends hear about your arrangement, I let out a small laugh. Your friends? You mean the country club gossips who funded Elizabeth's 3 failed businesses? Elizabeth's face flushed red. At least I can rely on family, she spat. No, I replied coolly, you mooch off family. There's a difference. The room erupted, but amidst the chaos, something finally became clear. This wasn't just about bank accounts. It was about control. A family unwilling to accept a woman they couldn't buy or manipulate. The midnight phone call from my cousin Margaret confirmed my suspicions. Her voice was urgent. Jennifer, I just overheard something at the country club. Elizabeth's husband is filing for divorce. He's frozen all their joint accounts. My heart raced. What happened? She's been forging his signature on business checks, racking up credit card debt he never knew about. We're talking hundreds of thousands in hidden debt. Now it all makes sense. The obsession with your finances, the relentless attacks on your independence. A drowning person will grab at anything to stay afloat. The next morning, Lisa came to my office looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. I need to confess something, Jennifer. Her voice trembled. When I married Peter, I owned 3 successful boutiques. He convinced me to sign them over, said separate finances meant I didn't trust him. She looked down at her hands, her wedding ring glinting in the light. Now, I can't buy groceries without asking for permission. Watching you stand your ground, I realize what I lost. Is that why Elizabeth's been so hostile? I asked gently. I'm everything she failed to become, independent, respected, successful on my own terms. And it's eating her alive. David came home that evening with the full story. Remember that Aspen investment Elizabeth kept pushing? It was a desperate attempt to get Dad's money to cover her debts. I felt a pang of sympathy, but also a sense of resolve. This wasn't going to be easy. And I was right. At the next Sunday dinner, Elizabeth stormed in, wearing designer sunglasses indoors. A familiar attempt to hide her distress. She threw a sharp glare my way. Must be nice, being so perfect. Separate accounts, a big career, everyone's respect. This isn't about me, Elizabeth, I replied calmly. Of course it's about you, Miss Independent, looking down on everyone who needs help. There's a difference between needing help and refusing to help yourself, I shot back. Lisa surprisingly backed me up. She's right. I taught you that dependency was normal, Elizabeth. I was wrong. Mom, you're betraying me for her? No, Elizabeth. I'm finally telling the truth. Look at what financial dependency did to both of us. David stood up, finally seeing the full picture. You tried to destroy my marriage because you couldn't handle Jennifer's success. That's what this whole separate accounts drama was really about. Elizabeth's carefully constructed world began to crumble. The luxury lifestyle, the facade of having it all, vanished in an instant, and somehow, she decided I was to blame. That night, I started documenting everything. The accusations, the financial secrets, the confrontations, not for revenge, but for protection. A woman who's lost everything can be unpredictable, and Elizabeth was becoming desperate. Looking across the dinner table, I saw her smudged designer mascara and trembling hands. I realized this wasn't over. She'd lost her marriage, her credit cards, and her reputation. In her mind, the only thing left to take was my happiness. Elizabeth's divorce became final on a rainy Tuesday. She showed up at her parents' mansion with 12 designer suitcases, tears perfectly timed for maximum sympathy. He took everything, she whimpered. Our accounts, the house, even my car. You mean his accounts, his house, and his car, David corrected. Maybe it's time you learned the difference. Her first job interview in 15 years was a disaster, as Lisa confided to me over lunch. She couldn't even explain what she's been doing all these years. Professional shopper isn't exactly a career skill. How's she handling living with you and Peter? I asked. Terribly. She's never followed a budget in her life. Yesterday, she cried because Peter wouldn't let her charge a $500 handbag. Family dynamics shifted dramatically at Sunday dinners. Peter started asking my advice on investments, and Lisa opened her own bank account for the first time in 40 years. I should have done this decades ago, she admitted. Watching you stand your ground gave me courage. Elizabeth, of course, was furious. So now everyone's following Jennifer's independent woman act. What happened to family unity? Unity doesn't mean dependency, David replied sharply. Look where your version of unity got you, divorced and broke at 33. Elizabeth tried different tactics. First came the tearful apology. I was just scared and jealous. Can't we start over? Then the guilt trips. Family should forgive family, unless you're too good for us now. Finally, the threats. I'll tell everyone you forced me into this situation, that you turned my family against me. A year later, the tables had fully turned. The same voices at the country club that once whispered about my separate accounts now praised my foresight. My career continued to soar, and I'd made partner at the firm. Inspired by my journey, I started a mentorship program for young women in finance. Financial independence isn't just about money, I told my first group. It's about having choices. David supported me through every step, proud to have a wife who'd fought for her principles. You showed my whole family what real partnership looks like, he said. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was still living with her parents, working part-time at a boutique she used to shop at. Last week, she reached out, trying one last time to manipulate me. I've changed, she claimed. I'm learning about financial responsibility. Can't you guide me? I sent back a simple response. Some lessons cost more than money. Now Lisa calls me regularly, seeking financial advice and building her own investment portfolio. She's rediscovering her business skills, a piece of herself she thought she'd lost forever. You didn't just save your independence, she told me once. You showed us all what we'd given up. Even Peter admitted his mistake. I wanted control over the family through money, he confessed. All I did was chain them. 3 of David's cousins opened separate accounts after seeing our example. Elizabeth's situation became a cautionary tale in the family, a reminder that dependency isn't love. It's a chain. Recently, I received an invitation to speak at a women's finance conference on maintaining independence in marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very thing Elizabeth had tried to shame me for had become my platform for helping others. In my office, David had framed my first partner nameplate and hung it next to a photo of my immigrant parents. They taught me that true security comes from within, not from someone else's bank account. And while Elizabeth still glares at me during family events, her power over me is gone. She tried to undermine my boundaries, but in the end became the perfect example of why those boundaries mattered. When it comes to choosing between family harmony and financial independence, what would you pick? When Elizabeth tried to shame me for maintaining separate accounts, should I have given in to keep the peace, or was standing firm the right choice? And perhaps the hardest question of all, was Lisa's regret over giving up her financial independence a warning sign we should all consider? 3 years ago, I married David Wilson, thinking I found my happily ever after. Instead, I ended up in a mansion that felt more like a prison, surrounded by my husband's controlling family. Let me paint you a picture of my daily life. Every morning, Nancy, my mother-in-law, would greet me with her sugary sweet tone, dripping with condescension. Karen, darling, where are you going dressed like that? She'd ask. To work, as usual, I'd reply, already bracing myself for her next demand. Don't forget to transfer your paycheck to the family account, she'd remind me, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. We need to manage our resources together. At first, I went along with it, eager to fit in, to be part of the family. But soon, I felt the walls closing in. So I started secretly keeping a portion of my earnings. I had to, something didn't feel right. David began monitoring my every move, checking my phone records under the guise of concern. Who were you talking to for so long? He'd ask, his eyes narrowing. Just Sarah from work, I'd lie, discussing a project. Mother thinks you spend too much time on your phone, he'd warn. Maybe we should switch to a basic plan. Even my sister-in-law, Jessica, made things worse with her constant prying. David, did you know Karen bought coffee 3 times this week? So wasteful, she'd tattle like a schoolyard snitch. Robert, my father-in-law, played the role of the reasonable one, but he was no different. We believe in pooling our resources, Karen, he'd say. Individual spending leads to family discord. I was losing myself in their world of control. One day, I managed to call my brother, Michael from the bathroom with the shower running to muffle the sound. Sis, this isn't normal. You need to get out, he urged. I'm trying, I whispered. I've been saving up, but it's not easy. This isn't love, Karen, it's abuse. David wasn't always like this, but Nancy had poisoned him against me. Last night, he came to me with a chilling request. Baby, Mom thinks we should have access to each other's emails. You don't have anything to hide, right? What about privacy, David? I challenged him. Of course I trust you, but family transparency is important, he insisted. Mother says. What about what I think? I snapped. Or does only your mother's opinion matter now? He glared at me, his face hardening into someone I barely recognized. Now, as I write this, I'm preparing for another secret meeting with Sarah. She's the only friend I have left, the only one they haven't managed to scare away. My hidden savings are growing, tucked away in a place they'll never think to look. But one wrong move and everything could fall apart. My name is Karen Wilson, and this is my story of survival in the golden cage of the Wilson family mansion. But my secret didn't stay hidden for long. What's this, Karen? Jessica's shrill voice pierced the air as she barged into the living room, waving my savings book like a trophy. My heart stopped. She'd found my stash. Sneaking money away from the family, are we? She sneered. Mother, Father, David, come quick. Within seconds, I was surrounded. Nancy's face turned an alarming shade of red. You ungrateful little snake. After everything we've done for you, she hissed. What I earn is mine. I tried to stand my ground, but my voice trembled. I have the right to save my own money. David, darling, Nancy cooed, turning to my husband, her tone softening into something far more sinister. Remember those late nights she's been working? Those meetings with her coworker, Sarah? Now we know why. That's not true. I protested, but David's face had already darkened. And there's more, Jessica added, her eyes gleaming. I saw messages on her phone with some guy named Michael. Michael is my brother. I screamed, but Robert stepped forward, his facade of calm chattering. Enough, he commanded. We can't trust her. She needs time to reflect on her actions. Before I could react, they seized me. David just stood there, watching, his eyes cold and distant, as they dragged me up the stairs to the guest room. David, please, I begged, tears streaming down my face. Don't let them do this. Karen, he said flatly, this is for your own good. The door slammed shut, and I heard the lock click. Nancy's voice was the last thing I heard before the silence swallowed me. Your phone and laptop will stay with us, she taunted. Maybe some time alone will help you understand family loyalty. Days passed in that suffocating room. Desperate, I searched every corner for something, anything that could help me escape. In an old desk drawer, I found a stack of documents. As I read through them, my hands started to shake. They were incriminating files, fraudulent investments, charity records doctored by Nancy, evidence of systematic embezzlement. They weren't just controlling, they were criminals. Through the thin walls, I overheard them plotting. She's been in there 5 days now, Mother. David's voice was muffled but clear. Do you want to lose her like we lost your first wife? Nancy reminded him. Karen is showing the same signs. We can't trust her. You're right, Mother, he agreed. We'll keep her under control. I slumped against the wall, realizing the nightmare I was truly trapped in. My husband wasn't just complicit, he was one of them. But they hadn't taken everything. They didn't know about the old phone I hid in, a lifeline tucked away in my pillowcase. Sarah would notice my absence. Michael would worry when I didn't call. I just had to wait, document everything I heard, and stay strong. They thought they were breaking me, but instead, they'd given me the ammunition I needed to break them. In the guest room, I found an old lamp and remembered a trick from my college electronics class. Stripping the wires carefully, I managed to make a makeshift charger for my hidden phone. The moment it powered on, I saw dozens of missed calls from Sarah and Michael. I quickly texted Sarah. Locked in Wilson guest room. Need help. Call Michael. While waiting, I photographed every incriminating document I could find. Investment fraud papers, charity bank statements, loan documents. Each image went straight to my email. Downstairs, their voices drifted up to me. Those loan applications under Karen's name cleared. Good work, David. I heard Robert say, casual as anything. Thanks, Dad, David replied. My hands shook as I realized the truth. My own husband had stolen my identity. Jessica, darling, how are those credit cards working out? Nancy asked. Great, mother. Karen's name is on all of them. If anything goes wrong, she'll take the fall. Jessica laughed. Then I heard sirens in the distance. Heavy footsteps echoed on the porch. Police were responding to a welfare check. Chaos erupted downstairs as I banged on the door. Up here, I'm locked in. The door burst open. Michael rushed in, followed by 2 officers. Karen, thank God. Nancy appeared, all innocence. Officers, this is a family matter. Our daughter-in-law has been unwell. Save it. I cut her off. I've been held prisoner for a week. David pushed through, desperation in his eyes. Baby, please, we were only trying to protect you. Protect me while stealing my identity. I asked, my voice trembling with rage. Jessica turned pale. What's she talking about? I faced them all. The business loans, the credit cards, the charity fraud. I know everything. The officers glanced at me, interested. Ma'am, would you like to press charges? I met David's pleading eyes. 7 days ago, I might have wavered, but not anymore. Not yet. But I want a restraining order against all of them. Michael helped me pack under the officer's supervision. Nancy's face twisted with anger. You ungrateful little. Choose your next words carefully, Michael warned. In the car, reality hit. I was free, my phone buzzed, David's name lighting up the screen. Karen, please, I love you. Mother made me do it. Did she make you steal my identity too? I replied. I'll change. We can work this out. There's nothing to work out. Divorce papers are next. At Michael's apartment, I finally broke down. They took everything from me. No, sis, he reassured me. You're alive, you're smart, and you have evidence of their crimes. You won. The next few days brought desperate attempts at reconciliation. Flowers, messages, promises. Karen, please, David begged outside Michael's building. Mother was wrong. I was wrong. I'll leave them. We can start fresh. You had your chance, I replied, unmoved. Jessica tried next. We're family, Karen. Families forgive each other. Family doesn't steal your identity and use your name for fraud. That's not family. Even Nancy showed up, all tears and regret. Darling, we were just afraid of losing you. So you locked me up. Perfect logic. I said, then blocked their numbers and deleted their messages. Michael helped me find a lawyer. In my new apartment, surrounded by the evidence on my laptop, I felt a new strength rising in me. The scared, compliant Karen was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone ready for justice. 6 months after my escape, I sat in my new corner office, watching everything unfold. The anonymous tip I'd sent to the FBI about Robert's investment fraud had started an avalanche. Breaking news. Wilson Family Charity under federal investigation for massive embezzlement scheme. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Gee, they're arresting Jessica right now for credit card fraud. I smiled, remembering the evidence I'd leaked through untraceable channels. The house of cards was falling. Minutes later, Michael called. Did you see the news? David just got picked up for identity theft. Those business loans in your name came back to bite him. Karma's got perfect timing, I replied. Watching the news, I saw Nancy Wilson walking out of the federal courthouse, head down, looking defeated. Headlines blared. Wilson Family Charitable Foundation misappropriated millions, and Wilson families fall from grace. A legacy of lies. My own life was unrecognizable from a year ago. My marketing firm was thriving. Turns out, a week in a locked room offers plenty of time to envision a future. I'd signed 3 major clients this month alone. You've come so far, Sarah said over lunch. Remember how scared you were? Now, every Tuesday night, I ran support groups for financial abuse survivors. The news anchor's voice broke through our conversation. Robert Wilson sentenced to 15 years for investment fraud, he announced. Just then, my office phone rang, displaying a blocked number. Out of curiosity, I answered. Karen, please. Nancy's voice cracked with desperation. They're taking everything. Our house, our accounts. Funny how karma works, doesn't it? I replied. We're your family, she pleaded. No, you were my prison. Goodbye, Nancy. I hung up. I turned back to the TV just as David was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. This is what you get for identity theft and loan fraud, I muttered. My assistant poked her head in. Your 3 o'clock is here, she said. Send her in, I replied, as a nervous woman stepped inside, her eyes wide and fearful, a mirror of my own face a year ago. You're safe here, I assured her. I know exactly what you're going through. My phone buzzed with a message from yet another unknown number. Jessica again. The cops are saying 10 years minimum. Please, Karen, help. Delete. Block. The TV droned on. Wilson family business files for bankruptcy amid federal investigations. I glanced around my office, walls lined with awards, a thriving business, and most importantly, freedom. They had tried to break me, but all they managed was to destroy themselves. My brother's words echoed in my mind. You didn't just survive, sis. You thrived. I looked out my window at the endless stretch of cityscape, my heart brimming with possibility. The divorce papers lay ready to be signed. I had no forgiveness left for them. Let them rot in their cells, drowned in debt, and watch their precious reputations dissolve. The news ticker scrolled with one final headline. Wilson family empire crumbles. A tale of fraud, abuse, and justice. I turned off the TV, ready for my next appointment. Someone else needed to learn what I now knew. The best revenge isn't just surviving, it's succeeding. What would you do if you discovered your spouse not only imprisoned you but also stole your identity for criminal activities? Would you expose their crimes right away, or would you strategically gather evidence while appearing broken? Share your thoughts in the comments.